Hey everybody. Tonight we're going to have a little look at my Gourami tank while I talk a little bit about filtration and water changes and what I like to refer to as tank personality. It's been a busy day for me as far as getting other stuff done in other fish tanks. It's been really hot out. It's 9 o'clock at night. I just really don't feel like doing a lot of maintenance on this tank. But I do feel like doing a water change. It needs one. The tannins are really building up in there. The plants are getting a little dense on the surface. I just need to open it up and let some more light in and remove some of the tannins from the water just to clear the water up, allow, some more light to pass through the water itself and make this tank a little more visible for everybody. I do enjoy it nice and tannin stained like this, but I do like to see my fish, and my plants do need light. So it's time to do a water change. It is also time to do a filter change because I cannot remember the last time I did a filter change on this tank. Now, I'm not one that's a stickler for keeping track of things. I'm not real detail oriented. And my guideline of when it's time to do a filter change on most of my tanks is when I'm kind of scratching my head and I can't really seem to recall when the last time I did a filter change was. Now on my tanks that have hang on the backs, that's simply every time I do a water change, the filter pad is just part of the water change, and so that goes without saying. I'm simply referring to these tanks that I have these external canister filters on, and in this case I have the Sun 304B that pretty much everybody has, or something equivalent, very similar. I've heard people go as long as a year between filter changes, and I'm a little astonished by that, but I'm going to get into a little more detail about that in a minute. For me to say I can't really remember the last time I did a filter change on this tank means it's probably been about a month now, maybe 6 weeks, something to that effect. I might wind up, if I were to look back and find out, I might surprise myself that a little time's gotten away from me. Maybe it's been 7 weeks, on the stretching it. It's probably not been that long though. So even though it needs it, I'm not going to do it tonight. I just really don't feel like it. I'm going to put it off, and the next time I do a water change on this tank, which will be within a week, maybe 10 days, I'll do another water change, and I'll worry about the filter then. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought that in itself is sort of worth talking about. It's what I refer to as tank personality. And to me, your tank should not only reflect your own personality as far as your tastes in styling, if you like the neon gravel and glow in the dark, pirate ships, then that's fine. I'm not, your personality, your aesthetics, that should all be reflected in your tank. But more importantly, what should be reflected in your tank is your lifestyle, your personality, your skill set, your capabilities. If you've been keeping fish for 6 months, don't get fish that are labeled expert fish just because you feel cocky and you've kept some guppies alive for a few months. Now you're going to jump right to expert fish. Just don't do that. But on a larger sense, I look at myself, and I've had people ask me about discus and if I'm ever going to have a discus tank or if I'll ever do a high-tech tank, and I always say no. If you had asked me that when I had 6 months experience keeping fish, I'd have been like, oh, you're darn right I'm going to be having a discus tank one day. And I've had visions for one. I wanted to have a big 125-gallon planted tank with discus and, 100 cardinal tetra swimming around in it. And in my mind, it was going to be amazing. As time went on, however, and I not only learned about keeping fish, I learned about myself, and I learned about what I'm willing to do and what I'm capable of doing. I've learned that I need to take my own little personality quirks into consideration, and part of that is just not being real detail-oriented, not keeping track of things very well. And for the most part, I have fish that are pretty durable and pretty hardy. I also take all of that into consideration when I set up my filtration, and I set up the water current and the water flow, and I set up the plants in the tank. I put all this thought into the tank so that the tank functions in a way that allows me to say, you know what, I just don't feel like doing a filter change tonight, so I'm not going to. I'm just one of those people that will blow it off because I don't feel like doing it tonight. I can do that. I don't have a tank that's got fish in it that can't tolerate a little more nitrates building up over the next week or so. So, tank personality is important, and being honest with yourself, both with your skill set and just simply with the kind of person you are. You know, I've said before, I'd like to have had the discus tank. Once upon a time, I tried to grow orchids because I thought, you know, being the guy with the fish and the orchids and stuff in the basement, that would be cool. But, you know, the reality is I'm not that guy because I can't keep the damn orchids alive because that's just too fiddly of a plant for me. I don't think I'd be very successful if I kept a discus tank. I know that I have the understanding of how to keep a discus tank. I just don't think I'd do very well at it. I don't think I'd do a good job at keeping a discus tank. And therefore, I just don't have a whole lot of interest in doing that because I want something that I'm going to get maximum amount of enjoyment out of it. So for me, actually doing some gardening and doing some pruning and tinkering with the plants and everything, that is enjoyable to me. So while this might look like a high maintenance tank to somebody, the maintenance and all for me is still part of the fun. So I am really, in every sense, this tank really sort of reflects me and my personality and the way I like to keep fish and what I like to look at when I'm keeping the fish. You know, I sit down here, I'm not looking at something that I find unattractive. Some people think this tank might be too dark. Some people might think you can't see the fish well enough. I've got fish in there that you hardly ever see because they hide. You know, if that's not your thing, that's fine. Everything about your tank should reflect you, just like most everything about my tanks reflects me. We all have to compromise on what we'd like to have versus what we can have. We have to compromise on size. We have to compromise on maintenance, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to wind up doing on this tank tonight is simply doing a water change and not really worrying about the filter. I'm going to get in there and remove some of the plants simply because that's nice and easy. The glass doesn't even look like it needs wiping down. I'm really going to keep it to a minimum tonight. So I am finally going to wrap the video up with a follow-up, and we'll do the after, and we'll get to see how much tannins I actually do remove tonight. That's going to be dependent largely on what the pH in the tank is. If the pH is as low as I'm expecting it to be, and we will go have a look at that very briefly, but I'm expecting it to be around 6.4 in this tank. It's got a lot of tannins in it, and that water's been sitting in the tank for about 10 days to 2 weeks now for the most part, so the pH has probably dropped considerably, which will prevent me from doing a very large water change because I can't shift the pH too hard in the tank or it will shock the fish. So again, I understand all this. I know what I'm doing when I do these water changes. I understand what's going on with my filter and with my nitrate climb. Speaking of nitrate climb, I did want to get back to that real quick. These canister filters are not simply magic erasers that make the stuff that's in your tank vanish. Let's just speak in terms of fish poop. You know, we'll call it the waste in your tank. It gets sucked into your filter. Now, it doesn't vanish. That is more or less the equivalent of sweeping it under the carpet. You simply can't see it, but it is still in your tank for all intents and purposes. The water that's in your tank is being drawn in, it's flowing through your filter, it's flowing right over top and through all of that filth and then right back into your tank. Just because the physical filth is being restrained and held within the filter medium does not mean that it's still not simply decomposing and decaying fish waste. Whether it's lying on your bottom of your tank looking ugly or it's trapped in your filter box invisible to you, it's doing the exact same thing. So I'm not removing that stuff from my tank, I'm simply removing it from my site. I am fully aware of that. As that stuff builds up and you get more and more breakdown, you know, a nice fresh new filter, if you go a week or 10 days between water changes, you're only going to get a certain amount of nitrate climb. If you've got some old funky filter that's been sitting there for 6 months and you haven't done anything to it, you're going to get a lot more nitrate climb in that same week to 10-day period, simply because you've got so much more filth in the tank that you just can't see, but it's in there and it's still breaking down, and the longer it goes, the more rapidly it breaks down. Just like anything, when you throw out something in the sun and it's rotting away, once the process gets going and the breakdown begins, it accelerates, and the same thing is happening in your filter. So a newer, cleaner filter that in this case is maybe say a month to 6 weeks old, I'm not going to have a huge amount of decay going on between now and my next water change. So that is part of what I take into consideration when I say I can let it ride one more week. If this was 6 months in and maybe it had been a little while, maybe it'd be a little bit of a different story. But all of those factors considered, I'm able to simply just blow this off and do a nice, quick, easy water change, because that's what I feel like doing, and that's how my personality makes me sort of just kind of whatever, I'm going to blow the filter off tonight, and that's fine. I can do that. So let me get on it. We will wrap this up with any final thoughts. Anything that happens between now and then I can add to the end of this video. I also do want to apologize real briefly for the little trickling water you can probably hear. I don't know how it's going to sound on camera, but I do have the camera positioned right next to my brand new crayfish tank. So if you're not familiar with that, you probably do want to subscribe, because the crayfish tank is going to be a lot of fun. I've got some cool video of it already, and there's going to be some more good stuff coming up. So let me get started on doing the water change, and then we'll get right back to watching the wrap up, and we'll see how big of a difference I make. Alright, that's about what I expected to see on the nitrates. Nice bright red vial. I knew it was going to be that way. It does not take long for the nitrates to get right back up there on that tank. It's a very, very heavily stocked tank. I just kind of accept that. The pH, however, does sort of surprise me. It is a lot higher than I expected. It's about 6.8, and that is a little more than I was expecting. It's been, I don't know, maybe 10 days since I've done a water change on that tank. I didn't do a really big one last time, maybe 25%. At the time, the pH was very low, and my tap was running about 7.3, so I had to do a minimal water change to keep from shifting the pH very much. And I brought it up to about 6.8. And it's fairly stable. It is still at 6.8. Now, the reason I find that so interesting is because of the amount of tannins you saw in the water. The water was downright tea-stained, and I have very, very little buffering capacity. I only have a carbonate hardness of about 0 to 1, and I do have some sodium ions in my water, and the sodium accounts for a little bit of buffering, but not nearly as much as your carbonates do, and I have almost no carbonates in the water at all. So it's interesting that the pH was as stable as it was between water changes, but that has allowed me to do a fairly significant water change. I did about a 50% water change, and that's going to bring the nitrates well down. And while they'll still be up around 40 parts per million based on how red this vial is, they'll be below it, and I won't worry about it. And in another week I'll be able to do another water change, and we'll get that filter taken care of, and everything will be fine. So let's go back over and have a look at the tank once it's finished filling back up, and we'll see just how big a difference we made. Alright, everybody. Now, normally when I do one of these before and after videos, I give it a good few hours, maybe even do it the following day, the next morning, something like that, if I'm doing it this late at night. In this case, I decided I just want to get this one over with, so to speak, because I got a lot going on this weekend, and I really don't want to have to wrap this video up tomorrow. I'd rather get this done tonight. So, we did just do the water change about, I don't know, maybe an hour ago at this point. And you can see the difference that it's made. All I really did was get in there and clear out the floating water Sprite and do maybe a 45 to 50% water change, and that was it. I didn't wipe down the glass. I didn't do anything. I did, of course, use a towel and some Windex, and I wiped down the tank after I was done to get all the drip marks off of it, but I didn't wipe down the glass on the inside. The only thing to note that I found interesting during the water change that I would like to discuss for a moment was just the random chance of me happening to go and check the water temperature while I was refilling the tank. There was no reason for me to believe the water temperature would have changed. Now, I understand that a lot of you have water heaters. A lot of you call them hot water heaters. Those you have to be careful with. You understand that. You know that you run out of hot water at some point, and if you're doing a really big water change, you need to be careful to make sure you don't run out of hot water. I'm not in that situation. I have what is known as a winter-summer system, and our hot water comes directly off our boiler in our furnace. So we just have perpetual hot water, provided we have fuel oil for our furnace, which we do. So, for whatever reason, don't know why, I went in to go check the water. And right as I was checking the water and thinking, wow, that's cold, I heard water running in the pipes over my head. So apparently my wife was running the water upstairs doing something. I don't know if she's washing dishes or running the dishwasher or something. But in the same way that you can't be in the shower when somebody runs the water because the water turns like ice on you, the same thing had happened. And I actually stopped the flow of water back into the tank and waited. And it was a significant amount of time. before the water actually, I felt the pressure change, and then of course the water went back to the normal temperature that I had expected it to be. So that amount of time would have put a significant amount of cold water into the tank, and while I don't know if it would have killed any of the fish, it certainly would have dropped the temperature of that tank by several degrees. I will do a video someday on my thoughts on fish and maintaining certain temperatures and the temperatures I keep my tank. I know I promise a lot of videos, but it's difficult for me to get to all the stuff people would like me to discuss. I really do my best, but I can only do so many videos. I do think I put a lot of them out, but I can't cover everything all the time. But a little shift in temperature of a few degrees in a tank is not really going to overly stress the fish. It's not that big a deal if you don't match water temperatures exactly. This, however, was an unusual circumstance where the water got significantly colder as it was flowing into the tank, and would have done so for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. It would have been a significant portion of me refilling the tank with water that was many degrees colder than what I thought it was. It was maybe in the upper 60s when I thought it was in the upper 70s. So that was just something to note. It was unusual. I'd never been in that situation before. It had never crossed my mind that if someone flushed the toilet or ran the water or took a shower or whatever while I was running the water, I thought about it in terms of maybe me affecting the shower, but not in terms of the shower actually having an impact on me filling the water back into my tank. So just a little something to note. Other than that, there was nothing to really point out that we didn't cover already. So thanks for watching this one. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. You really never know what you're going to get with me. Oddball stuff pops up all the time, and I've always got something going on here in the fish room. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.